"You have 1 week to show me you're worth my time," she said, and I realized I'd been with someone who saw love as a performance review. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd just spent 2 weeks proving my worth to pharmaceutical executives in Miami, only to come home and discover my girlfriend had prepared her own evaluation criteria. I pulled into our townhouse driveway at 12:47 a.m. after the red-eye from Miami, exhausted but genuinely excited to see Melissa after the longest work trip of my career. The pharmaceutical conference had been absolutely brutal, 14-hour days that started with 6 a.m. breakfast presentations, back-to-back client meetings, networking dinners that stretched past midnight, and enough coffee to power a small city. But I'd secured 3 major distribution contracts worth $8.2 million for our Pacific Northwest territory and received confirmation from my regional manager that I was being fast-tracked for regional director, a promotion that would mean a $45,000 salary increase and the respect I'd been working toward for 6 years. Despite the grueling schedule, I'd even managed to find time between meetings to venture into this charming independent bookstore near South Beach where I'd spent nearly an hour with the elderly owner tracking down a signed first edition of Migrations by the poet Sarah Chen, Melissa's absolute favorite writer whose work she quoted in handwritten notes she left around our house. The book had cost me $340, which was more than I'd normally spend on anything frivolous, but the genuine smile on the bookstore owner's weathered face when I explained it was for someone special made it worth every penny. I'd also made a detour to her preferred confectionery downtown, the boutique place that made those lavender honey truffles she always posted about on Instagram with captions about life's small luxuries, picking up a custom box that had cost another $85 but represented 2 weeks of missing her and wanting to make up for lost time. As I sat in the rental car for a moment, gathering my energy to carry everything inside and trying to shake off the jet lag that was making my head feel like cotton, I noticed all the lights were blazing in our house despite the late hour. Through the dining room window, I could see Melissa sitting perfectly straight at our oak table, her hands folded in front of her like she was conducting a board meeting, staring directly at the front door with an intensity that made my chest tighten. There were papers spread out in front of her in neat, organized rows that reminded me of the contract layouts I'd been reviewing all week, and her laptop was open with what looked like a detailed document or spreadsheet glowing on the screen. My stomach dropped like I'd missed a step on a staircase. I'd been with Melissa for 4 years, and I knew her body language better than I knew my own quarterly sales statistics. The rigid posture, the deliberate positioning at the head of the table, the way she wasn't fidgeting or checking her phone or showing any signs of normal human restlessness. This wasn't someone who dozed off waiting for their partner to come home from a business trip. This was someone who had been planning a conversation for days, maybe weeks, and had choreographed every detail of how it would unfold, from the lighting to the seating arrangement to the supporting documentation she'd apparently prepared. I grabbed my rolling suitcase and the carefully wrapped gifts, but my excitement about sharing the incredible news from Miami had completely evaporated, replaced by that familiar knot of anxiety that had been tightening in my chest more and more frequently over the past few months of our relationship. I barely made it through the front door before Melissa launched into what sounded like a presentation she'd been rehearsing for weeks. "Owen, I've been doing a lot of thinking while you were gone, and I've realized we need to have a serious conversation about the future of our relationship," she said, her voice carrying that controlled tone she used during her marketing presentations at work. She gestured to the chair across from her like we were about to conduct a performance review, which, as it turned out, wasn't far from the truth. "I've created a comprehensive assessment framework to evaluate where we stand over the next 7 days," she continued, sliding a printed document across the table toward me. I stared down at what could only be described as a relationship spreadsheet, complete with daily expectations, quality time requirements measured in hours and minutes, emotional availability metrics, and even a scoring rubric for how I should demonstrate my commitment. There were categories like active listening score, 1 to 10, spontaneous affection frequency, and career versus relationship priority balance. At the bottom was a section labeled Weekly Evaluation Outcome with 3 possible results: relationship continues, probationary period extended, or mutual separation agreement. I looked up at Melissa, who was watching my face with the intensity of someone monitoring a scientific experiment. "You've got to be kidding me," I said, but she shook her head with complete seriousness. This isn't a joke, hon. I've been tracking patterns in our relationship for months, and the data is concerning. That's when she pulled out her phone and began scrolling through what appeared to be a meticulously organized collection of screenshots and documented incidents. I have records of every text you sent after 8 p.m. that mentioned work, calendar entries showing 17 business dinners in the past 6 months, and a log of conversations where you brought up your job within the first 10 minutes. She turned her laptop screen toward me, revealing a shared document titled, ON, Relationship Performance Analysis, that contained months of entries I'd never seen before. Each entry was dated and categorized. March 15th, discussed quarterly projections during romantic dinner, negative. April 22nd, canceled weekend plans for client emergency, major negative. May 8th, spent 45 minutes on work call during movie night, negative. I realized this wasn't a spontaneous emotional outburst triggered by my 2-week absence. This was a methodically planned intervention, complete with backup evidence, predetermined metrics, and what appeared to be multiple scenarios she'd already considered. Melissa, I said slowly, trying to process what I was seeing, how long have you been documenting our relationship like this? She didn't even have the grace to look embarrassed. Since January. I started noticing patterns, and my therapist suggested I keep track of specific behaviors so we could address them constructively. The word, constructively, hung in the air between us like a challenge, and I found myself wondering when exactly our love had become a problem that needed to be solved with data collection and performance improvement plans. Rather than defending myself or promising to change, I found myself asking Melissa one simple question that seemed to catch her completely off guard. If you've been evaluating me for 6 months, why am I just hearing about this now? Her confident expression faltered for the first time since I'd walked through the door, and she opened her mouth twice before managing to speak. I wanted to give you a chance to improve on your own first, she said, but her voice had lost that rehearsed quality. My therapist said I should try indirect communication before moving to direct confrontation. I leaned back in my chair, suddenly feeling calmer than I had in months. So this is direct confrontation? It's an intervention, she corrected, straightening her shoulders. I'm giving you one final chance to show me that our relationship is actually a priority for you. The phrase, final chance, hit me like a physical blow, not because it hurt, but because it crystallized something I'd been trying to ignore for months. Melissa, I said quietly, if you need 7 days to decide whether I'm worth your time, then I need exactly 0 days to realize this relationship ended months ago. Her face went pale. What do you mean? I mean I won't participate in a system where my worth as a partner is quantified on a spreadsheet. I won't be graded on my affection or scored on my emotional availability like I'm a customer service representative. I stood up, leaving her evaluation framework on the table between us. You've been treating our relationship like a business problem that needs optimization, and frankly, I deserve better than that. She scrambled to her feet. Oh, and you're overreacting. This is just a tool to help us communicate better. No, this is you deciding unilaterally that I'm failing at something and creating a scoring system to prove it. A partner who loved me would have talked to me about feeling neglected. A partner who respected me wouldn't have spent 6 months documenting my failures in a secret spreadsheet. I picked up my suitcase and the gifts I'd brought her, setting the book and chocolates on the kitchen counter. You can keep these. Consider them a going-away present. Where are you going? The panic in her voice was real now, but it was too late. Somewhere I don't have to earn points to be valued. I pulled out my phone and sent a quick text to my boss requesting to work remotely from a hotel for the next week due to personal circumstances, then grabbed my laptop bag and headed for the spare bedroom to pack what I'd need. Owen, please, can we just talk about this like adults? Melissa called after me. Adults don't ambush their partners with performance evaluations, I replied without turning around. Adults don't secretly document their relationship like it's a research project. And adults definitely don't give ultimatums disguised as opportunities. I heard her following me down the hallway, but I'd already made my decision. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt like I could breathe. I checked into the waterfront extended stay hotel downtown at 2:30 a.m., and for the first time in our 4-year relationship, I experienced something I'd almost forgotten existed: complete peace without the underlying tension of feeling constantly monitored and evaluated. The room overlooked Elliott Bay, and as I sat by the window watching the early morning ferry traffic, I realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt this relaxed in my own space. That's when I started discovering just how extensively Melissa had been tracking my life without my knowledge. While setting up my laptop for remote work, I noticed location sharing was enabled on my phone through an app we'd set up years ago for emergencies, but when I checked the history, I could see she'd been monitoring my every movement for months. Every client dinner, every after-work drink with colleagues, every stop I'd made during business trips was documented in a timeline she could access anytime. Even more disturbing was the discovery of an email forwarding rule she'd set up on my work account during a time when she'd helped me troubleshoot my laptop, supposedly for emergencies, but the forwarded emails showed she'd been reading my professional correspondence for over a year. I found evidence of a shared note document on my phone labeled Daily Check-ins that contained her numerical scores of my relationship performance dating back 8 months, with categories like morning affection level, 1 to 5. Work discussion percentage, and weekend availability score. Each day had a color-coded rating: green for satisfactory, yellow for concerning, red for unacceptable, and I counted 47 red days out of the past 90. The most shocking discovery came around 4 a.m. when someone knocked on my hotel room door. I expected it to be Melissa, but instead found Kendra, her best friend since college, standing in the hallway looking genuinely apologetic. "Owen, I'm so sorry to bother you this late, but I needed to talk to you before Melissa spins this into something it's not," she said, clearly having been crying. I've been telling her for over a year that this behavior would backfire, but she wouldn't listen. Kendra revealed that Melissa had been doing similar evaluations of their friendship group, creating spreadsheets tracking who called her first, who remembered important dates, who supported her career moves with sufficient enthusiasm. 3 of our mutual friends have basically stopped hanging out with her because they felt like they were being graded on their friendship performance, Kendra explained. Sarah stopped returning her calls after Melissa sent her a text breakdown of why their lunch conversations weren't emotionally supportive enough. Jennifer cut contact completely after Melissa created a shared calendar trying to schedule their friendship activities with mandatory weekly check-ins. I stared at Kendra, realizing that what I'd experienced wasn't an isolated incident of relationship anxiety but a pattern of controlling behavior that had been driving people away for months. "I should have warned you sooner," Kendra continued, "but I kept hoping she'd realize what she was doing and stop before she destroyed the best relationship she'd ever had." By day 3, Melissa's tactics shifted from calling and texting to showing up at my workplace downtown, interrupting a crucial client presentation to demand we talk like adults. I was in the middle of explaining our new distribution timeline to executives from Northwest Medical Supply when my assistant knocked on the conference room door, her face apologetic and clearly uncomfortable. "I'm sorry to interrupt, Mr. Thompson, but there's someone here who says it's an emergency," she said, and through the glass wall I could see Melissa in the lobby, pacing and gesturing animatedly at the reception desk. I excused myself from the meeting, feeling my face burn with embarrassment as I walked past my colleagues who were clearly witnessing my personal life imploding in our professional space. "Melissa, what the hell are you doing here?" I asked, keeping my voice low but firm. "We need to talk right now," she said loudly enough that several people in the lobby turned to stare. "You're being completely unreasonable, and I'm not going to let you throw away 4 years because you're having some kind of midlife crisis." My manager, David Rodriguez, approached us with a careful expression of someone trying to defuse a potentially volatile situation. "Owen, is everything all right? Do you need security assistance or should I contact HR?" he asked quietly, and I realized that my personal drama was now affecting my professional reputation in ways I hadn't anticipated. After I managed to convince Melissa to leave with promises that we'd talk later, David pulled me aside with genuine concern. "Look, I don't want to pry into your personal business, but if you need any kind of support or intervention, the company has resources available," he said. "That kind of workplace disruption can create liability issues, so just let me know if you need help handling this situation." The humiliation of having my relationship problems spill into my career was crushing, But it got worse when Melissa began posting cryptic messages on social media that evening. Her Instagram stories featured quotes about toxic partners who abandon relationships when things get real, and men who can't handle a strong woman's standards, accompanied by photos of herself looking thoughtfully sad against scenic Seattle backdrops. The posts were clearly designed to paint me as the villain in our story, and within hours my sister called me, concerned about what she was reading online. "On, what's going on? Melissa's posting some pretty intense stuff about relationships and abandonment," my sister said. Her latest post talks about someone being too cowardly to work on themselves and running away when confronted with truth. That evening, while researching extended stay hotels for a longer rental period, I stumbled across something that explained everything. I found references to Dr. Amanda Sterling, a relationship coach who ran workshops called Strategic Love Auditing and promoted what she called relationship accountability frameworks. Her website featured testimonials from women who had successfully used her methods to optimize their partnerships and eliminate emotional waste in romantic investments. The program taught participants to create performance improvement plans for their partners, complete with documentation systems, evaluation criteria, and strategic ultimatum deployment. Melissa had been following this woman's program to the letter, treating our relationship like a business that needed restructuring rather than a partnership that needed nurturing. On day 4, I received an unexpected call from Melissa's mother, Margaret, but instead of the lecture I was bracing for, she surprised me with something I never saw coming. "Owen, I hope you don't mind me calling, but I needed to talk to you before this situation gets any worse," she said, her voice carrying a weight I'd never heard before. "I went through something very similar with Melissa's father 30 years ago, and I've regretted it every single day since." Margaret explained that during her early marriage, she'd become obsessed with creating structure and accountability in their relationship, giving her husband ultimatums and performance standards that she believed would make him a better partner. "I thought I was being strong and setting healthy boundaries," she continued, "but what I was really doing was trying to control someone into loving me the way I thought I deserved. He left for 2 weeks, just like you did, and when he came back, he was different. Distant. Resentful." She told me that her husband had returned out of guilt and social pressure, but their marriage never truly recovered from that incident. He became this hollow version of himself, always walking on eggshells, always checking to see if he was meeting my expectations. We stayed married for 18 more years, but we were never really partners again. Just 2 people managing a household and raising a child. The divorce, when it finally came during Melissa's sophomore year of college, had been quiet and inevitable. "I destroyed the man I loved by trying to remake him into someone I thought I needed," Margaret said, her voice breaking slightly. "Please don't come back to my daughter out of guilt or pressure. Oh, she needs to learn this lesson now, while she's young enough to change, rather than spend the next 30 years destroying every relationship she touches with these same patterns." The conversation shook me more than I expected, but what really hit home was when my own parents called later that evening. My mother, who had always praised Melissa and seemed genuinely fond of her, confessed that she and my father had noticed concerning behaviors but hadn't wanted to interfere in my relationship. "Remember last Christmas when Melissa criticized your gift choices in front of everyone?" my mother asked. "She said you'd clearly not been paying attention to her hints and that maybe next year she'd need to be more direct about her expectations. Your father and I were shocked, but we didn't know how to address it without causing problems." My father got on the phone and mentioned the time Melissa had corrected me during a family dinner about my career priorities, telling my relatives that I was still learning how to balance work and personal commitments, as if I were a child who needed guidance. "Son, we watched you shrink a little bit every time she did things like that," he said. "We kept hoping you'd stand up for yourself, but we also didn't want to overstep." Hearing these perspectives from both sides of our families made me realize that the problems in our relationship hadn't been invisible to others, and that my decision to leave wasn't the overreaction Melissa was portraying it as. On day 5, I met with Dr. Patricia Williams, the therapist I'd started seeing 6 months earlier at Melissa's insistence that I work on my communication issues, and she dropped a bombshell that completely reframed everything I thought I knew about my relationship. "Owen, Based on what you've described over our sessions, your relationship has exhibited several clear markers of emotional manipulation and psychological control, she said, pulling out a folder I'd never seen before. I've been documenting patterns in your stress responses, and I need to show you something that might be difficult to process. She spread out my intake forms from 6 months ago alongside notes from our recent sessions, creating a timeline that was honestly shocking to see laid out so clearly. When you first came to me, you described yourself as confident in your career, decisive in your personal life, and generally satisfied with your relationship despite some minor communication challenges, she explained. Look at how you've described yourself in recent weeks, constantly second-guessing your decisions, feeling like you're walking on eggshells, experiencing insomnia and anxiety about normal relationship interactions. The comparison was brutal and undeniable. 6 months ago, I'd mentioned occasional disagreements about work-life balance but described Melissa as supportive and understanding. In recent sessions, I'd been describing a completely different dynamic, constant monitoring of my behavior, fear of saying the wrong thing, and a persistent feeling that I was failing at something I couldn't quite identify. Owen, the promotion you just earned came despite your relationship dynamics, not because you'd achieved some kind of healthy balance, Dr. Williams continued. Your work performance has actually improved since you've been staying late at the office, partly because it's become a refuge from the tension at home. She showed me notes where I described feeling more relaxed and confident during business trips, and how I'd begun to dread coming home to what I'd started calling status report conversations, where Melissa would quiz me about my day, my interactions with colleagues, and my plans for the weekend. The fact that you've started referring to your own home as a place where you need to manage your girlfriend's mood and expectations is a significant red flag, she said. Healthy relationships should feel like a safe harbor, not a performance stage. The most devastating revelation came when she pulled out a stress assessment I'd completed during our second session. You scored in the moderate anxiety range 6 months ago, which you attributed to work pressures, she said. Last week, you scored in the severe range, and every stressor you identified was relationship-related. Looking at the data, I experienced a moment of painful clarity that felt like waking up from a dream I hadn't realized I was having. The constant fatigue, the second-guessing, the feeling that I was never quite good enough despite objective success in my career, these weren't personal failings or communication issues that needed therapy to resolve. They were normal responses to being in a psychologically controlling environment.